Hello everyone and welcome to my studio. I'm Miki and today we are painting a peaceful winter scene using watercolors. I will guide you step by step, keeping everything simple and relaxing so you can paint along with me. For this painting I'm using cold pressed watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton and 300 GSM, which means it's thick and can handle a lot of water. I'm taping the paper down with masking tape to keep it flat while painting. This also gives a nice clean edge at the end. Next, we'll need a pencil for the sketch. You can use a regular HB pencil or a mechanical one. I prefer a mechanical pencil. For brushes, I'm using a size 8 round brush, a very thin brush for the details, and an angled filbert brush. I also need an eraser, and for the final details I'll be using a high coverage white acrylic paint and a brush for it. The watercolor palette I'm using is from Daler-Rowney. It comes with a size 4 brush, but I personally don't use it very often. I prefer brushes with a sharper tip. I also need some clean water and a few paper towels. Alright, let's get started. I'm starting with a very light sketch. First, I add a few guiding lines to separate the sky from the ground. Here I mark where the little house will be. I'm keeping everything very simple, just a few loose lines and no details. Now I'm drawing the roof of the house. A small door and a few windows. One here, another one here, and the bigger one right here. I'm also sketching the layer of snow on the roof. And adding a small chimney for the smoke. I add a few small branches coming out of the snow. And a few loose lines for the pine trees. And I'm lightly erasing some of the stronger pencil lines. I keep a small piece of paper nearby to test the colors and remove excess paint. For the sky I'm using cerulean blue, and here I have a little bit of cobalt blue. I mix them together. Test the color on my scrap paper. Alright, I like this shade. I apply the color to the paper and add a bit more water to keep everything soft. I use a paper towel to create soft cloud shapes. I do this in a few different areas to keep the sky light and uneven. Then I add a little more color to slightly darken the sky. I create a few more clouds including around the house. I'm being careful not to touch the house with my brush, painting gently around it. And while the paper is still wet, I want to add a few pine trees. I take some viridian green and a bit of ultramarine blue and mix them together. Okay, this feels a bit too dark, so I add a little white. I don't want the color to be too intense. I start painting a few pine trees without focusing too much on them. I keep them loose and messy. These are the trees in the background, seen from the distance. I want them to look slightly faded, almost lost in the mist. I add more on the left side as well. And one closer to the house. For the snow, I add a bit more white to this color. I load just a small amount of paint on the brush and add a few lines to suggest the snow. Add a little more color around the small branches to create some shadows. I also add a few shadows at the base of the house where the pine trees will be. Using the same color, I add a few soft shadows to the snow on the roof as well. I wipe the brush on my scrap paper. And this is our snow for now. We'll add more of it later in the final details. For the small branches, I mix Payne's Gray with a bit of Ivory Black. I remove most of the paint from the brush on my scrap paper. I draw the branches in different directions. They don't need to be very defined because we'll add a bit of snow over them later on. I really enjoy this step. For the house, I take some burnt umber and mix it with a bit of ultramarine blue. I want to paint a small stone house, which is why I'm working with gray shades for the walls. I'm careful not to paint over the windows. I deepen the color slightly. I want this side of the house to be darker as if it's in shadow. I paint around the door and the windows. I add a touch of ivory black to darken this area even more. I also add a bit of shadow under the roof to give the house some volume. For the chimney, I mix ivory black with ultramarine blue to create a deep cool gray. Then I add a few loose lines on the house to suggest a stone texture without making it too detailed. I define the lines around the door and the windows a bit more. I do the same on this side as well. I don't want to paint the inside of the windows yet. I want everything to be completely dry so the colors don't blend. I take some green and start painting the trees in the foreground. I begin with a straight line and then I tap the brush to the left and to the right. It doesn't need to be even, I'm just playing with the brush on the paper without fear. I add a few trees on the left side as well. And one tree behind the house. Here, be very careful not to touch the house. I add a darker green and a bit of Payne's gray to deepen this color. Then I go back over the trees to add some shadows. I try to place this color near the bottom of the branches to create a bit of volume. I clean the brush really well and take some clean water. I draw a few lines at the base of the trees. I want the color to soften and spread slightly, as if the trees are hidden in the snow. I add a few more small branches in front of the trees, around the house, and over here as well. I add a bit of shadow here. Now I want to paint the smoke coming from the chimney. I start with white and add the first layer. Then I add just a tiny bit of this gray. It doesn't show very well at the moment, but you'll be able to see it once it dries. Okay, and now I let everything dry really well. Now that everything is dry, I want to paint the windows. I start with yellow. And while it's still wet, I add a bit of orange. Oops, I added a little bit too much, but that's okay, we can fix it. I clean the brush and gently try to lift some of the color. I add the same color to the other windows as well. For the door, I don't have a specific color in mind. I just mix the colors until I find the shade that I like. Okay, this should work. I try to add a bit of shadow on this side. While this is drying, I want to add the final details using white acrylic paint. I take a small amount of paint on the brush and start adding it over the trees. I try to place it mostly on the top of the branches. I add a bit on the roof as well to make it look more textured, and a little along the edges. I also add a bit on the walls of the house and on the door, around the windows. And on our small branches too. Again, nothing is precise here. I'm just adding the paint loosely and messily all over the place. I also add some to the trees on the left side to finish them as well. For the trees in the distance, I dilute the color with water and apply it lightly. I want to keep that soft, misty effect. I add the final details to the windows, a bit of texture on the door as well, and on this window here. I lightly splatter some white paint to create a falling snow effect. I'm not sure how visible it is on camera, but in reality you can see the tiny splashes. And this is the finished painting. I love how soft and peaceful it turned out. Thank you so much for painting with me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, leave a comment or subscribe for more watercolor videos. See you in the next one. Goodbye!